Hey, Kalina. Where is, I'm not Micheal. Get rid of that.
Exciting. Okay.
Jonas, should I make you now the host?
Yes.
All right, let's see how we do that.
I will in turn make Leo and Kathy.
And I am
Kalina.
recording this today, so just so everyone
Perfect.
knows, that way we can share it.
Great.
Where is, I'm trying to figure out where I can make a new host. Patrice, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. Sorry I'm a little bit late.
Oh, you're good. Do you know where on the screen I can share, can make someone else the host?
I think if
So
you go
I
to,
actually
like,
never
your
used it.
options.
Where, Leo?
If you go to like, there's like the little, if you roll over their picture, there's the little 3 dots. If you click that, there should be-
Got you. Oh, yeah. Make host. Boom. All right.
Oh, nice.
Jonas, you should be the host now.
All right. I will try and let's see. Well, I can make someone else host. Can I make them co-host? Oh, that's interesting.
So
Okay.
what you guys could maybe do, if you can only have one host, is one of you really be responsible for the muting, the unmuting, and then one of you really monitor those questions in the box, just and tag team it so that you're good to go when it comes time to opening it up for the audience questions.
So it's between Jonas and who that needs to be the host? Jonas and Garret?
Jonas and Garret.
All right. So, I mean, if
Garret, do you want to be host?
I can follow the chat box.
Okay. All right. I will work on making automatically muting everyone.
what's up, Tabby? I ain't seen you
What's
in a
good?
minute. How are you doing, man? You graduated this year, right?
Yeah, man.
Congratulations, man. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes, yes. So, Jonas, if you go to like participants options, you can make it so people are
Everyone who's
automatically
joined-
muted on entry.
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
did that.
Cool.
And I disabled people being able to unmute themselves. So only I can unmute people now.
Andre, Cities United, correct? Thanks for
How are you doing?
joining. Greatly appreciate it. I don't know if any, have you guys met Andre yet?
Yeah, we met him yesterday.
Right, super.
Good
I
guy.
worked with Anthony Smith on several projects and stuff before, so he's been out to Denver a bunch of times. So again, appreciate you representing Cities United today.
Appreciate you. Yeah.
I'm going to unmute Kristin Bronson.
Hey, Kristen.
Hi, folks. How are ya?
Good. Sam, what's up, friend?
He's connected.
So Jonas, you guys are going to be, you're going to mute everyone, is that correct? And then
Yes.
unmute, is that the plan? So no one has to.
Everyone, but the moderators and the people on the panel will be
Okay.
muted probably permanently, and then we'll monitor the chat to unmute people and let them ask questions as it
Super.
arises.
Okay. So Jonas, you have all the names of everyone who should be unmuted then, including the students who are going to speak with you guys.
Yes, they should all be on the document.
Yeah,
that
they're
we
all in
have.
panelist introductions. And you have access
So-
to that, right, Jonas?
Yep, I'm right
Okay.
on the document right
Great.
now. Yeah, so you're excited. Joey, how did the potential for Spanish language translation
Yeah,
go?
I'm reading that right now. So
Mhm.
you're the host now. So it says the host can start the interpretation feature. So wondering where that is on here.
Yeah, let me see if I can find that article. Okay.
And then you just select the
Click
language.
interpretation on, that's interesting. Where is that button? Click interpretation.
All right, so
Zoom
maybe, hold on, I may have, let me see if this, what this is.
Do you want me to give you back the host since you do
Yeah,
have
why
the,
don't you do that and let me see if I can fiddle around. I'm sure you guys want to just kind of run through some stuff and I'll get this for us, okay? That's not it.
okay?
Audio, here's audio. Well, I'm just gonna, I know I can look it up on the email you sent me, so let me track that down.
And I can actually put that email.
Oh,
the
there it
link.
is. Language interpretation. Enable language in meetings advanced heading. All right, let me find that. That is not it.
Mhm. Okay.
So if anyone knows what we're doing, we actually have a Spanish interpreter that's going to be able to join. And there's a way on here to turn on an interpretation on Zoom. I'm just curious if anyone's already done that before, because we would love to make sure that's an opportunity. And I'm looking to see where that could, it's supposed to be pretty easy. I just don't see where.
I have not done that before.
I have not either.
It says advanced in meetings, advanced setting. You know what? Maybe it's on the home screen.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, let me look at that.
Okay. And apologies to everyone who's muted. We're muting everyone automatically on entry, and just as like a, you know, sort of a noise reduction measure. And we'll have to have Joey or whoever the host becomes unmute you, which will happen, I promise.
Hi, Maritza. Hi, Jonathan. Good to see you guys. I recognize Garret and Kalina from our action table event. How are you guys? Nice to see you.
Here we go. Advanced. That's not it.
Okay, thank you.
Youth commissioners, before you all get started, is there anything, I know you signed Ben and I up for recording, but is there anything additional we can help you do throughout that would be helpful?
I think personally just monitoring the chat to see if there's, you know, anything that I overlook or Garret overlooks or Leo or Kalina overlooks, because, you know, we're only human, and just making sure that everyone's voices can get heard. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Hey, Jonas.
Mm-hmm.
I may have just figured out how to allow a co-host as well. So
Oh, cool.
in a second. I'm in the meetings stuff, so we'll see if that works. You know what? I'm going to pass it back over to you now, and let's see if this allows you to. Where's the? Hold on. There. All right, I'm going to make you the host, and who is potentially co-host? Garret.
Garret, yeah.
You know what? That might be for future meetings because I changed it, but I think it might.
Yeah.
Let me just check and see. You guys have about 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you all know if there's a way to make the participants list go in order of like joining as opposed to alphabetical? Just, you know, so I'm not like going through alphabetically trying to get people onto the wheel.
Ooh, am I co-host now? Yes, because I can unmute people. I think. Yes, I can unmute or mute people. Perfect.
So Jonas, it looks like the interpretation piece had to be set up prior.
Did it? Oh.
To me even creating the meeting. So I don't think we're going to be able to do this. We don't want to ask everyone. I'll see if we can.
It's a shame.
Yeah, but moving forward, it looks like when you create the meeting, it has to be done then.
Joey, I think if you want, you could potentially, you do have the record function, and you could always have the interpretation done after the fact and post that.
That's great. Super.
I would suggest that when you can hit, but just you got to remember to hit record.
Yep. We are recording right now, actually, so it's an automatic.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Good.
Let me see. So for all of us still learning Zoom, for future reference, if you have someone who can interpret in a different language, prior to scheduling the meeting, you can set up interpretation. And what it is the interpreter has that one channel, and those who are needing that language can select that channel. So it is something good to know moving forward. We didn't know about this until about 30 minutes ago, and I didn't want to create a brand new meeting as well too.
So I think I've got everyone who's going to be on the panel either unmuted, or send a request to unmute. So yeah, we're good on that front.
It's 16 hours.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Mayor's Youth Commission Gun Violence Prevention Town Hall. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and we're going to start in a few minutes once everybody has had the chance to connect. In the interim, please keep your microphone unmuted. I think that's been done automatically, and we'll begin in a few minutes. All right, I think everybody has connected now, and we're going to begin. Welcome, everyone, to the 2020 Gun Violence Prevention Town Hall. I'm Kalina Kulig, and on behalf of the Youth Commission, I would like to thank everyone for being here to discuss this important issue. I am from the Youth Commission's Subcommittee on Gun Violence Prevention, an organization dedicated to reducing the impact, both physical and mental, of gun violence on Denver's youth. We organize this event as a part of our goal to make youth voice heard in government and discuss solutions to this issue. We will start by asking our panelists questions submitted by the community, then do a gift card drawing. Next, we'll move to a period of Q&A with the audience, and discussion will end with a call to action for the city's youth and a presentation from the Apprentice of Peace Youth Organization. But first, a few reminders. Please keep your microphone on mute if you are not speaking. We will be monitoring the chat function throughout the event, so if there are any questions you would like asked during the Q&A, please share them there. If there is a specific panelist the question is directed to, let us know who you would like to answer it. This event is being recorded and will be posted on social media. The link will be sent out to email by everyone who RSVP'd for the town hall, and feel free to distribute it further. Lastly, gun violence is a very sensitive issue, so please keep questions or comments respectful and topical. Now, let's introduce the panelists. First, we have Jonathon McMillan, founder and director of Be Better Than Average.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Pleasure to be here. As Kalina said, my name is Jonathon McMillan. I am a lifelong Denver native, very passionate about making sure that our youth have everything they need from the adults in their lives to be successful. And I'm very happy to be here. So thank you, Kalina.
And representing Cities United, a national organization dedicated to reducing gun violence, is Andre Canty.
you go. How y'all doing? Thanks for having me on. Yeah, again, my name is Andre Canty, originally from Knoxville, Tennessee, but now at Louisville, Kentucky, representing Cities United. And I'll get a little bit when we get to the actual questions, but we all about using public health approach and supporting city leads and city mayors, reducing the homicides and shootings of Black males between the ages of 14 and 24. Also do fundraising, also an organizer.
Next, we have Kristin M. Bronson, the Denver City Attorney.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm really honored to have been asked to participate on this event, so thank you so much for including me. I am the Denver City Attorney, so I manage the Department of Law at the city level, but I also chair the Mayor's Youth Violence Prevention Action Table and look forward to maybe telling you a little bit more about that as the event continues. So thank you again for having me.
Also joining us is Paul Pazen, the Denver Chief of Police.
Hello, everybody. I want to echo some of those thoughts. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to represent the police department in this aspect or in this approach. We truly believe in taking a public health view on a public safety issue, and working together is how we can come up with better outcomes, better solutions to keep our young people safe. So we're excited to be a part of it. Also to listen, to hear ideas that Youth Commission and others have on how we can do this type of work, particularly with the pandemic that we're facing.
Our next panelist is Maritza Valenzuela, the Youth Health Manager at Denver Public Health, a department of Denver Health.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. I work on various youth health projects at Denver Public Health, and including youth violence prevention that I've been working on for the last 5 years, and really bringing a public health approach to all types of violence in Denver. And also worked on the youth gun violence report that we released last year. And I'll put a link to that in the chat box in case anyone hasn't seen it yet.
And finally, we have Samuel Elfay, who is 19 and works at McBridge Impact.
Hi, everybody. My name is Samuel Elfay. I work with Jason McBride. A lot of you guys might be familiar. Here on the east side and Park Hill. Work with a lot of youth and gang members, a lot of youth that are at risk. And I'm all about us youth and how we can be in the conversation. And I'm really excited to address these issues. So thank you for having me again.
Thank you all for being here and sharing your expertise. We'll start off by asking some questions from the youth and the Denver community that were submitted prior to the event. So our first question is going to be for Ms. Valenzuela. What does it mean to take a public health approach to gun violence prevention, and how should the public health approach influence prevention efforts?
Thanks, had to get unmuted there. So yeah, so overall a public health approach to violence, which would also apply to gun violence, means a few things. One, that we want to use data and really understand the problem before we try to address it. So that includes using concrete data and evidence to understand the problem first. We want to engage the communities that are affected, believing that the real experts are the people who have experienced it. We also take an upstream approach to gun violence and all types of violence by looking at prevention. So we really believe violence is preventable. It is preventable, and that has been shown by research. So looking at how do we prevent it from happening in the first place, or how do we prevent young people from even getting close to being exposed to gun violence or harmed by it. And there's different ways to do that. And we also want to look at risk and protective factors that cut across all the types of violence. So there are things like connectedness to school and connectedness to family that make a young person less likely to be involved with violence, including gun violence. So how do we promote those things rather than just focusing on the negative, the things we want to reduce? We still want to do that, but also look at how do we protect young people proactively and advance those things. As far as gun violence, we would also really look at the root causes. That's kind of going back to the evidence. Where does this problem start? And in order to do effective prevention, we have to understand the root causes and address those. And specifically, when we're talking about communities affected and gun violence, we would want to engage young people, their families, and the communities that are most affected by gun violence when we're looking for solutions.
Thank you. Our next question is for Police Chief Pazen, and it is, how do young people typically get access to guns, and how can this be prevented?
Thank you. This is a challenge, and it's a problem that's only getting worse, unfortunately. I wish I had better news to talk about. We monitor this very closely, and typically there's a correlation between guns that are stolen, meaning a gun owner leaves a gun in their car, and then that car gets broken into, or they don't properly secure their weapon at home. Unsecured weapons is the typical route by which these guns end up on the street. I'm confident that there's not a gun store in the metro area that is selling guns to 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds. But unfortunately, too many young people are getting access to these guns. And when I talk about monitoring data, for 3 years, we saw a decrease in stolen guns. This year, in 2020, we see a significant increase in guns that are being stolen out of homes, out of cars. In fact, if we compare January 1 through May 26, so just this past couple of days here, last year, 202 guns were stolen from either homes or cars. This year, we're at 257. So 55 more guns are on the street this year compared to last year, and that's very concerning. We need communities' help. One, those gun owners to be responsible and properly secure them. But two, how can we get this instrument off the street to keep our young people safe?
Our next question is going to be for the whole panel. What are some root causes of gun violence, and how can they be addressed?
I'm sorry that you just heard from me, but I do want to piggy. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say trauma. I mean, at the end of the day, and we can point to a lot of different directions, from a youth not growing up with a father at home, to a youth having a brother involved in gang violence, gun violence, and now his brother's locked up. I mean, but a lot of it at the end of the day comes down to trauma and what these young kids are going through, which honestly a lot of people don't know, but these are things that a lot of adults are going through. A lot of adults haven't even gone through yet. So with that said.
I would agree totally with what Sam just said. We have mental health issues that are related directly to trauma response and chronic and generational trauma. Additionally, unfortunately, America is a gun culture and has been since its inception. Over the last 40 years or so, we've just seen the doubling down on the gun culture, meaning it's romanticized in media, it's normalized within different factions of society as being a passage and a right of manhood to have a firearm and to settle conflict with firearms. And so, there's a lot of different things that play a factor into why we have gun violence in the streets. Between Sam and my answer, and I'm sure other panelists could add their 2 cents in. I mean, there's not just one or two things. There's a variety of things, and that's why it's so important that everybody who's on the panel, and quite honestly, everybody who's in attendance today, makes it a priority to kind of shift the tide and start turning things around from gun violence being so readily accessible and normalized in America.
Well, I'll speak from just the city perspective. One of the concerns that we have right now is that this particular public health crisis we're in right now, which is the global pandemic, is only going to exacerbate a lot of the root causes of youth violence, whether that's the socioeconomic factors, the behavioral health issues Jonathon mentioned, social isolation that a lot of our youth has experienced. Those things are only going to become a greater challenge with the prolonged time at home. Unfortunately, the challenge it's put on a lot of our community partners that would normally provide youth services that aren't able to do that in this economic climate and in a safer at home environment. And so really it is incumbent on us as a city to engage in those issues, identify how we can help fill the gaps, understanding that city budgets and state budgets are more pressed than ever, but it's something that we're taking a really hard look at right now on how we can help support.
Thank you, everyone. Our next question is going to be for Ms. Valenzuela. How is gun violence affecting the mental health of our city's youth?
Hey, so I was hoping that one of our youth advisors would be able to answer this question. He's trying to get into the meeting. He's running a little bit late. So maybe he'll be able to join and chime in. But you know, what I've heard and what I've seen working with some young people who are affected by gun violence and have lost friends to gun violence. That's multiple friends, not just one friend. It's very stressful. It's very shocking and difficult to, you know, lose a friend that way. It's difficult to lose a friend anyway, but in such a sudden way that really causes trauma. And then to have to worry about that happening to more friends is really a burden. So I think there's just that stress that comes with any grief and sudden loss and a violent loss. And then you know, not having a whole lot of people who can relate to that experience. So it is, you know, something to find peers who have the same experience that can be a great support, but it's not something that the general public can really relate to. I think that adds to it. So maybe we can come back and have Micheal speak to that a little bit more later. That's just my notes on that.
Yes, thank you for the answer. And if Micheal is able to join us later, we'll definitely loop back around to him. And this would bring me then to our next question for City Attorney Bronson. What role does the legal system have to play in preventing gun violence?
So when you talk about the legal system, that's kind of a big thing, and that you know, gun violence is there's a whole spectrum of opportunity from very early on prevention efforts through intervention and through what we call suppression efforts. And the legal system is involved in all of those. When we talk about the legal system, I think that begins in many instances with just our law enforcement officers and the role that Chief Pazen and the police department fulfills, but also it includes the courts, it includes prosecutors, it includes defense attorneys, probation offices, services that are provided through what we call pretrial offices. Pretrial services are when a young person has gotten involved with the judicial system but has not yet gone to trial, and there are services that are many times provided to that young person while they are awaiting trial. But it also involves, you know, parole boards and reentry programs once if an individual is incarcerated, their reentry back into the community once they get out. So it is a very long spectrum in terms of the time continuum of involvement. And so how we play a role, the main role really is in early intervention, getting kids when they first have a brush with the judicial system, and supporting a number of intervention programs or diversion programs, alternatives to jail that recognize everyone makes mistakes. And sometimes youth that go on to commit gun violence are involved with the judicial system much earlier in non-violent crimes. And if we can identify services and supports and identify challenges that individual, that youth, that young person, or their family is experiencing, and help support those kinds of programs that refer them to those kinds of services, we can really make a difference and perhaps turn them away from the road that they are on that could lead to gun violence. But that takes partnership, and it takes a lot of effort between not just the legal system, but partnership with organizations like Maritza's with Denver Health, organizations like the public school system, and developing those relationships and partnerships so that we can help identify a young person that is in need of these kinds of services, and then our ability to connect them to the right system supports, and then see them through to the end. It's also, I think, in terms of just the court system, it's also developing specialty courts. And there are a lot of programs through the district attorney's office or through our juvenile courts that are really around what we call restorative juvenile justice efforts, where we say it is not helpful to a young person who has a brush with the law to simply, throw them in jail and lock them up. We know that does not work. It is going to lead to what we call recidivism, or a repeat of the violence or crimes later on in their lives. What we need to do is get, as we discussed before, to the root causes and identifying how can we help this young person improve their life, how can we help them improve their opportunities, how can we perhaps correct inequities or systemic racism that has perhaps put them into the position where they are, that has led them to that point, and try to intervene early. So that really is a big part of how the legal system can help work on prevention efforts.
Thank you. And I was wondering if you, Chief Pazen, have anything to add to that, or anything to talk about as far as the role of the legal system in this issue.
I think Kristen Bronson covered it quite well. This is a big system. There are a lot of moving parts in it. And then it's important to note that we have some amazing programs that have been very effective for individuals. However, there's not a one-size-fits-all. So some folks do better in a faith-based type of outreach program. Others do better in a more structured approach of a city-administered type of program. And it's very important that we have that wide array of services to try to match the young person in need with a type of program that can get the best outcomes. Because truly, when we talk here in the police department, right? Good police work is solving a crime. Better police work is that the crime never occurred. And we can't do that by ourselves. It's those community partners, the nonprofits, the faith-based groups, the people that do that direct outreach, that if they can connect with a young person in need, if they can meet them at that crossroad and get them on the right path, it's so much better for our society than if that young person starts to stray down a different path. We would much rather prevent the crime from occurring in the very first place than pat ourselves on the back for solving the case.
Thank you. And on that note of nonprofits and their role in prevention efforts, our next question will be for Mr. Canty. What strategies does Cities United use to reduce gun violence in communities, and how could they be applied in Denver?
Yeah. So appreciate that. So it's kind of similar to what Maritza was talking about using that public health approach. And again, our concentration is for young Black males 14 to 24. Well, some things, almost as spoiler alerts, but we've been working with a couple of people in Denver, already. A couple of people on this call are city leads, city and county leads. So that's the kind of main activity and focus is, again, just partnering with mayors and their city leads, right? And that deals with coaching, movement building, technical assistance, and a lot of it has to do with a public safety help approach, and that goes into an actual plan, right? So bringing stakeholders together, right? So something similar to what you all are doing, so having a core team of people, varying sectors to come together to talk about the issue, because we're all trying to stop violence, right? We're all here to do that, but what do those particulars mean as far as using data to tell your story, how you tell your story, who should be in the room, who should be guiding it, all that kind of stuff, peer-to-peer kind of networking. So partner cities that we're with, we have 130 partner cities with more to come. We're trying to partner with 500 cities, right? With the goal of reducing that homicide and shooting rates by 50% by 2025. So we got 5 years to do this, right? And without those partner cities, also have community partners as well. So those who are not in government, right? So it includes businesses, that includes nonprofits, it includes young people. So this is where you all fit in. So elevating youth voice is one of our approaches, right? So having not just young people be there at the table, right? This proverbial table as we all talk about, but having young people be up here when it comes to decision making, up here when it comes to moving the work forward, and having young people in the day tell a lot of times what public officials should do, other adults should do. And with that, Michael Filmore was kind of mentioned, he'll be on in a second. Michael Filmore is actually one of our young fellows. We have a young fellow, a young leader fellow partnership we have with over 20 young people, and that includes people nationally. So we have representatives from Denver, Seattle, parts of the South, East, West, everything. And it's about not tapping into the potential of young people, right? Because young people are now, they're not just tomorrow, they're right now, they're right at the second. So acknowledging that, so that includes mentoring, coaching, but also having them build from each other, right? And lead if need be, right? But overall, it's the same public health approach that Maritza was saying. But again, I want to elevate the youth voice into this, right? Because this is a youth commission, so I want to emphasize the importance of young people in this room. But also it takes engaging youth, family, and communities, boosting education, expanding trauma-informed practices, building an inclusive economy, interrupting the cycle of community violence, and reshaping criminal and juvenile justice systems. So all these interconnect, right? Because violence in itself is huge, but under that, there are varying factors, there are varying people affected by it and not affected by it. So there's different concentrations that people put forth into it, but it's a more holistic approach. It's a huge approach, and it takes partnership, it takes collaboration, and it takes planning. So all that encompasses what Cities United do. And again, what we do is service for you all.
Thank you. And I'm really glad you brought up the role that young people have to play there, because that's really what is at the center of the Youth Commission, and our mission is getting young people involved in politics. And so our next question is going to be for Samuel Elfay, and it's about this idea of including the young voice in politics as well. And it's how should the city adapt its prevention efforts to the needs of young people?
Okay, so first and foremost, a little bit about myself. I have a lot of support from Joey Pace, Jonathan McMillan, Jason McBride, Grasp, a lot of people here on this call. So for me, how should the city adapt its prevention efforts to the needs of young people? I think we should have youth here on the table and have access to the decisions that are going to be ultimately impacting and affecting them. So when we have these other organizations here, and a lot of organizations are playing middleman, a lot of them aren't really here to help in the community, but to the ones that are, and I could just name out a couple: McBride Impact with Jason McBride, Grasp with Johnny Williams and Francisco Gallardo, Boys to Men with Kenneth Crowley, Be Better Than Average with Jonathan McMillan, and Kids Above Everything with Dane, and so on and so forth from Ashik. When we bring these organizations together and have the youth that they're actually impacting every day, I think that when we bring those youth to the table and have them ultimately sit down with the mayor, ultimately sit down with these policy makers and these cities officials, I think we're weeding and eliminating a lot of these middlemen and organizations that aren't effective for our community at the end of the day. Now, when you ask about what better opinion is it, somebody else from the outside or someone who has better experience, I think we'd all agree on somebody who's had their own experience. So when it's us youth that are having these experiences, having these encounters, being affected the most, I think it's most important and yeah, most effective as well to be at that table and be able to speak and have our own voice and address our own issues and our own problems. So for me, I think that that's how the city should adapt to its efforts and our needs of our young people, and that we should just be able to sit and have access to the mayor and all of this.
Thank you for that great answer. Now, you mentioned a little bit about Be Better Than Average, and our next question is going to be for the director of Be Better Than Average, Mr. McMillan, and the question is, what has been your path to addressing youth gun violence?
Wow. So probably everything you've heard in the last 10 or 15 minutes from each of the panelists, but particularly what Sam just said, I find myself oftentimes as being that intermediary between both sides of the table. I grew up here in Denver, like I mentioned earlier. I was involved in gangs. I was involved in some of the violence. And so I know what it's like to have a probation officer and have to go to court and be on that client side of things. But then once I actually went to prison as a young adult, I really started to study the things that I needed to learn about myself and learn about the systems and learn about community so that I could start making some changes and really start to affect some change and hopefully inspire some young people to be able to make better choices and wiser decisions than I did. And so what I've found myself in a position over the last several years is being able to work with a young man like, say, Sam, or work with a young man like Micheal, and help them come to the table to advocate not only for themselves, but also advocate authentically for their community and help inform policy and inform programming for ladies like our city attorney, Kristin, Bronson, or program leaders like we have right here. We have Kenneth Crowley on the call. We have Joe Hodge with the Struggle of Love. And so I find myself, again, just kind of like being this intermediary hub where I make connections. I help bring authentic voice to the conversation to, again, hopefully advise and inform whatever policy which is going to come down the line. I've worked with Chief Pazen several times over the last several years, helping have conversations about how do we use our police department more in line of serving upstream needs instead of, like he had mentioned, in preventing crimes rather than just the suppression effort. And then on the other side of that is how do we lead our community and how do we engage our authentic community voices, our community leaders, our youth from the community to lead a community-based suppression effort where it changes the norm and the acceptability of gun violence and the gun culture. So I know that was a mouthful, and I apologize if I rambled on, but there was so much in what you asked. I also just very quickly, Andre, shout out to you because I am a alumni of Cities United, their Roadmap Academy. So the program works wonderfully because everything I just laid out to you are things that I learned as I spent a week in Louisville, Kentucky, learning how to connect the dots and put people together in the same room, same sandbox, and play nice together. So there you go.
Wow, that's really amazing to hear that you have that connection with Cities United also. And I believe we now have Michael Filmore on the panel.
Marco.
Yeah, hello.
Oh, great.
What's up, Jonathon, my guy, man? How y'all doing? I can start off just by introducing myself. I'm Michael Filmore. I'm from Chicago, Illinois. I currently stay in Denver, Colorado. I'm a youth advisor for Denver Public Health. Most of my work is in the district and education and in local communities doing grassroots work. But I also do national gun violence prevention and social justice work across different cities. As Andre mentioned earlier, I'm also a part of the Cities United Fellowship. So,
Thank
and
you.
I could just answer
my guy.
So our next question is for you then, Mr. Filmore, and it is, how is gun violence affecting the mental health of the city's youth?
Okay. You know, like I said, I was raised in Chicago, Illinois, and that's the murder state capital of the world. And I watched my city influence my country. I grew up in Chicago, and I seen the violence and how it took over my city and changed the way my city works to this day. Every time I go to Chicago, I'm in a survivalist mode. Recently in Denver, there's been an uprising in violence. I've attended three candlelights in April alone. People that I grew up with, people that I knew, people that I call, my family and my friends that I've met. And so I sat out there in candlelights. I've experienced that. I lived on the east side of Denver. And at the time, it was one of the worst places in Denver at the time, and the gun violence was high. My brother was shot and killed. So I set out in community with families, and I seen the toll that it's taken on our communities, especially for youth. Our mental health it's been taken from us. We're in broken communities. When we look for justice and we're looking for where to go after our communities and these things that are happening inside of our communities, we don't know where to go, right? It's like we spend so much time normalizing death amongst our youth, dehumanizing our youth. We've lost, I feel like in some point in time, we've been losing hope, right? Like I said, I've been sitting with families and seeing the faces on different families, and even myself dealing with my own mental health battles and struggles. It's been hard for me, like I said, looking for, who can I come to support me when our police are shooting us and killing us and further incarcerating us, or when we don't have mental health support in our communities. I think about Nathaniel Woods, Jonathon, we talked about Nate, and I think about Nathaniel Woods. He was shot and killed in Colorado at Aurora Mall, a public mall in a public space. He was shot and killed in broad daylight with thousands of people at the mall. And that mall continues to operate, and it continued to operate that day. And it was reopened the next day as well, because it never closed. And I think about, that day, I got a phone call by a girl named Francesca. She called me, and she was working at the finish line at the time, and she told me, she said, "Michael, I don't know what to do. Somebody just was shot and killed in front of me. Somebody was just shot inside the mall, and they were killed right in front of the JCPenney. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I'm losing it. And I'm sitting here like, I'm thinking like, damn, like, oh, what, you know, I've been so normalized even in myself. It's so desensitized to myself. Like, you know, I'm here for you, right? Like, I'm here to support you. But it's like, damn, like another killing. And it wasn't like it was the most surprising shit. It wasn't like it was the most surprising thing to me. And then she told me, you know, I don't know, he was young, right? And then the news article was released that day. He was my little brother, you know, somebody I call my little brother that I seen weeks before that. And so, like I said, I think about how that impacts the community even in itself, right? How mental health support wasn't even there for the people that witnessed that. Francesca didn't get mental health support after that. You know, I directed her personally to myself, but if she didn't know me, who the hell would she have went to? And so I think about things like that, even like Galen Allen, you know, who was missing for 5 days, and community is the ones that really the ones that pushed that efforts to find him, and how they were frantic for 5 days straight with no support really from national television, no TV, no police, really no, it was a communal thing, and that community suffered together. And so, like I said, I think right now, mental health has to be the highlight for our youth, because we're changing. You know, as Black men, as Black youth, we have to walk around now, and think about every time we step out in a certain area, even if it's walking to a Aurora mall or going to a Aurora parking lot, you know, if we're going to get shot or killed. And so that's become our reality, the dehumanization and the normalization for gun violence in our communities is taking place now in Colorado. So.
Thank you.
I'm sorry if I went over it as well. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, y'all.
That's fine. Well, thank you so much for sharing that story. And I'm wondering if you, Mr. Elfay, had anything to add for how gun violence can impact Denver's youth, and specifically their mental health. Sorry.
I think Micheal addressed a lot, but as a youth impacted by gun violence, myself, I mean, it takes a lot of toll. Like Micheal said, in our community, I've seen a lot of the youth that I thought were strong in my community hold it up, you know, was acting hard, everything breaking down now, seeing that their friends are passing away, that this has come to our reality. So I don't want to speak over and just double lap on a lot of what Micheal said. He did knock a lot of points, but I think it is a big problem in our community. Us youth are affected by it a lot. And like Micheal said, we don't know a lot of places to go to, you know. So with that said, like, making that more accessible for our youth right now is important.
Well, thank you to all of our panelists for those very insightful answers to the questions. We'll be moving next to a lottery and then the question and answer period. So we ask everybody, if you have questions for our panelists, please enter them into the chat now, and we will try to get through as many of them as we can in the question and answer period. And if it's for a specific panelist, please do note what panelist you would like to answer it in the question. And we've already received a few of these questions, so thank you all for those. And then again, please keep any comments respectful and topical. So now we're going to move to a drawing for the gift card lottery. But before that, I'd like to give a huge shout out to Patrick Hedrick and Denver's Public Safety Youth Programs for providing us with the gift cards. We all appreciate your support. And now I'm going to hand things over to Leo for the lottery.
Okay, so, hey, Jonas, can you enable screen sharing? So for the lottery, we'll be spinning an online wheel. I will share my screen momentarily. We're experiencing some technical difficulties.
Leo,
I've entered.
Good screen share.
Cool, thanks. So I've entered all of our participants' names into this wheel. So let's see. Okay, our winner is Stephanie Seiner. So we'll be contacting you by email for the gift card.
Okay. Thank you, Leo, and congratulations, Stephanie. So next, we'll be moving to the Q&A. And many of you have submitted questions, so we're going to get through as many of them as we can. So the first one I'm seeing here is for Police Chief Pazen. And the question is, where is the gun data publicly available?
So we release all of the data, and it's also by neighborhood. It's updated on a daily basis, denvergov.org/police/reports. You can access not only gun data information, but all crime information, whether that's violent crime or property crime.
Thank you. And then just a follow-up within that question is, what neighborhoods are you seeing the worst gun violence in as of just these last few months?
Well, great question. We actually have that readily available. So we look at all of Denver's 78 neighborhoods. We were really circling back to Kristin Bronson and her efforts leading the Mayor's Youth Violence Action Prevention Table. And we talk about two public health crises, right? The global pandemic that we're all dealing with, and not letting us forget about this crisis that we here in Denver, we in the metro area, are dealing with youth violence. And so looking at data from March 15th through May, we've seen the rise of gun crimes in 5 neighborhoods, and it's kind of geographically spaced across the spectrum. So leading the way is the Montbello neighborhood. Last year in 2019, there were 34 gun-related crimes. This year, 55. The Clayton neighborhood, which is in near northeast or northeast Denver, they're number 2. West Colfax went from 10 to 26. Harvey Park neighborhood in southwest Denver went from 10 to 25, and then the East Colfax neighborhood are the 5 that we're seeing the greatest increase since this pandemic, the stay-at-home orders started affecting our community.
Thank you, and thanks for providing that data as well. The next question I have is going to be for the 2 young people on our panel, and it is, what types of resources would be helpful? Teletherapist, community member supports, faith-based, or others?
Okay. Repeat that one more time for me. Oh, I see the question.
Yeah.
Okay, so just now addressing to the question that I was asked for, how should the city adapt its prevention efforts to the needs of young people, or just in general?
Generally, but then I think the question is getting at what kind of mental health supports do you think could be in place to address some of the harms that are coming from gun violence?
Yes, absolutely. I think therapist is number 1 most. For myself personally, getting out of jail, doing 8 months, having a lot of trauma, being a lot of shootouts, a lot of robberies. I didn't have anybody to talk to about it. I didn't feel comfortable to. So once I had my mentor, who was somebody who had been in the same position as me, Jason McBride, who had been a gang member himself, who had lived everything I've lived 100 times. I was able to speak to him and talk to him and get a lot of this trauma off of my chest. So even in my own personal experience, having a therapist, having someone to speak to and get all this trauma out of you is very important and mandatory, because it's just going to eat you up and kill you inside. And if you can't transform it, you're going to transfer it, you see? So that's just me, in my opinion, personally.
I think for me, I mean, we talk about a public health approach, right? And what that means to me is, you know, like Sam was touching on, having that mental support inside of communities. You know, a lot of people be like, why why do young people reach out to drugs and so many different other things so easily? And I think because they're so accessible in our communities, right? When drugs and guns and all these things that are not good coping mechanisms are fluctuating in our communities, right? When we don't even have therapists in our communities, when we don't even have the, hospitals that can treat mental support in our communities. I mean, Chicago only has a few trauma centers, right? So people gotta go all the way from certain cities to, to a whole, that's inequitable right there in itself, right? So we talk about these public health approaches, right? And if we have mental health and supports in our communities, some of these things, some of these violent acts that are acts of pain and an act of not being able to cope with things, right? Because they were released in different ways. When you have pain, they're released in different ways. And some people use drugs, some people use drugs and guns and violence to kind of manage those things, right? If we re-educate our communities through a community-based approach, of course, because we have people inside of our communities that are fighting every single day to support our communities, but they don't have the resources behind them, right, to support our communities as well. So at the city level, of course, I mean, we have to have more mental health support in our communities, and that is a wraparound support in itself. It can't just start with hospitals too. It's a whole different. It takes a multifaceted approach. Education. It takes schools. It takes people inside of our communities that we can look up to, like Sam said, right, like Jason McBride, that have experienced that people that have been in gangs before are people that have been a part of those communities. They need to be in those communities speaking to the youth and preaching back to the youth and re-educating our youth on how we can support ourselves away from the way that we was forced to do, right? Drugs, because of segregation and redlining and drugs and guns that are thrown in our communities. We were educated to use those, but we have the chance to be able to come to a public health approach and change that.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that answer and suggestions. Our next question is going to be for Chief Pazen and City Attorney Kristin Bronson. So, with the recent events in Minneapolis leading to the tragic death of George Floyd, how can we convey the youth of Denver the role of involving police in altercations? These so-called accidents generally occur when authorities are brought in to address situations involving men of color. With an organization like the Office of the Independent Monitor trying to bridge the gap between police and the youth of Denver, how can these questions be addressed?
So first and foremost, I think it's important to honor the life of George Floyd. That is a tragic death. It never should have happened. I do want to point to the fact that the Office of Independent Monitor and their creative approach in Bridging the Gap Kids and Cops program is designed to reduce the negative outcomes that we were seeing with low-level contacts between young people and the police department, and those types of situations escalating. This is an ongoing program. It's a program I couldn't be more proud of. I know of many examples where this work has helped not only build trust and strengthen the relationships between young people and police, but also to open our eyes in the police department, to open our mindset, and to really learn from young people. And I did see Nick Micheal on the participant guide. So if you wanted to do any kind of follow-up there, I strongly believe in that program. I strongly believe in the work that many on this the Zoom call are doing, because again, it's about prevention. It's about being proactive and working together, really trying to learn from different people's perspectives, and us talking together, us sharing our experiences, and really, that program in particular, getting really deep. It's not just surface level, hey, this is the tough aspects of being a police officer. Hey, this is the tough aspects being a kid growing up in a social media world. It's digging real deep in there to some of those real negative situations that have occurred, and then opening mindsets to the type of trauma that can inflict, the type of hurdles that can create for a young person as they progress. So I'll pause right there, and either Kristen or I believe Nick was on the call as well.
Actually, Chief, is it okay if I jump in real quick? This is Jonathan.
Please.
Yeah, so I'm one of the original facilitators of that program, and I could, yes, everything that Chief Pazen just said, the program is all that. But what I would add to what he said is that the program is an opportunity for real conversations and real relationships to be formed and based between the young people and law enforcement officers, which is really the meat of the entire program. That, and then additionally that there's solution-based conversations. So while the young people have an opportunity to really get into the mind of an officer and then learn what he's thinking or he or she is thinking about in these critical incidents that sometimes escalate to tragedy, needless, unnecessary tragedies. They're also able to learn what they can do on their end to mitigate some of those things. But I would say even more importantly, the officers learn and build relationships with the young people who are involved in the program, and get back to an understanding that young people are just that. They're young people. They're not little adults. They're people who don't necessarily haven't got to the point of having the emotional intelligence, or even should have the responsibility to mitigate and minimize the potential for escalation in those situations. So again, it's all about building those relationships, and it's all about solution-based conversations in those safe spaces with people like myself, facilitating those conversations to make sure that everybody gets a chance to have their voices heard. And the hope in building this program out is that we don't have situations like Mr. Floyd. We don't have situations like what we saw a few years ago in Minnesota with the young man who was killed in his car. We don't see situations like the young man who was killed in Baton Rouge by the officers, because we have created a very authentic community policing model that hopefully serves the community and not just the policy that is sometimes is detrimental to Black and brown communities.
I think all the speakers said it very well. I'll just say, I think it's really, first of all, just to honor the tragic loss of life and Mr. George's life here. Or Mr. Floyd's life here. We have to acknowledge that, and we have to mourn as a community, as a nation, when these kinds of things happen. And I think we also have to take advantage of the opportunity. These are really hard conversations, and we can't be afraid to have them as a city, as a community, as city leaders, as in our own neighborhoods. We have to take these opportunities to stop and say, what happened here? How can we as a city ensure that we're doing absolutely everything to prevent this kind of tragic loss of life happening here? And when we make our own mistakes here, we've got to be really honest with ourselves. There has to be accountability. We have to see that justice is done. We have to be transparent about what happens. And we've got to be really honest with ourselves and taking a hard look and ensuring that we really are doing everything we possibly can to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen in our community. And we know it has happened in our community. I'm not suggesting it hasn't. We know that it has. And so we have to be better. We just got to be better than that. And the only way to do that is to be really honest and transparent about it. So that's what I would just add.
Well, thank you all for your answers to that question. Our next question is also going to be for the whole panel, and it is, there is more pain in impoverished, non-resourced neighborhoods. How do we heal the systemic banishment of marginalized communities and rebuild them into environments where human potential can be pursued rather than survival alone?
Boy, can you read that one more time?
It's a good question. It's a really good question.
Of course. And it's also in the chat. There's more pain in impoverished, non-resourced neighborhoods. How do we heal the systemic banishment of marginalized communities and rebuild them into environments where human potential can be pursued rather than survival only?
I'll just say a few things to jump in on that. First, we need to empower those communities. We need to listen. We need to elevate their voices. We need to acknowledge systemic racism and marginalization and disenfranchisement, and bring true equity to those communities. And one thing that Mayor Hancock has done is created an entire race and social justice initiative within the city and county of Denver, including a race and social justice office, a chief equity officer. And this is something he's done in connection with work with Cities United and Andre and their team, as well as Bloomberg Philanthropies. We've had wonderful national partners that have helped us in this effort, but it is a wholesale change in the way we govern. It is ensuring that every single decision that we make is viewed through an equity lens, receives an equity review, and ensures that if there is a way to, first of all, we must identify any potential inequities for marginalized communities that are either being harmed by the decision or should be benefited by the decision or don't have access to even the conversation, and ensuring that we're taking that equity into account in every decision that we make as a city. It's a wholesale change and a very, very different approach than the city has taken before. And I really applaud Mayor Hancock for having, and Cities United and Bloomberg Philanthropies for really having brought this to Denver and forcing it into our way of governing and making it institutional so that it will hopefully survive from mayor to mayor.
Well, I want to echo that's what Kristen said about having some of these things institutionalized, because most of the bad things are institutionalized, right? And most of the inequities that Kristen talked about, they're institutionalized, right? So it kind of, no matter who's in office, no matter who's in power, those things remain. So how do we bring space for positive policy practices to where, survival isn't about what can I do in order to just survive today, and go towards, okay, all of our needs are met, so we can evolve, right? And I think also with that said is, again, this is a youth commission, right? And there's young people facilitating this conversation, and a lot of the more powerful points come from young people. Is their fight to fight, right? So meaning that some of the solutions come from them, right? Have them actually lead and facilitate, not just these conversations, but more about decision making, right? There's youth commissions, there's youth councils, right? So, and it brings one ownership, but also responsibility, right? All this is on you now. You got the ball. Now you got to shoot, right? I can't shoot for you. Only thing I can do is charge, right? I know Denver's a sports city. You get the reference, right? But only I can do is like lay the charge out. You shoot the ball, right? But I think just giving them that ball and saying, you can do this, and you don't have to really ask for permission from me, right? Is saying that we're all here. We're going to do this collaboratively, right? And I think transparency is also a key, right? And that goes in evaluation. What worked, what hasn't worked, right? So I'm always like a history geek when it comes to stuff. So looking historically when it comes to prevention, what worked that didn't work 20 years ago. We were talking about this 20 years ago when I was young, right? And what can be duplicated, what could be kind of cut away. And again, what could be institutionalized and sustained, not just sustained with rhetoric, and programs, initiatives, but the funding that's attached to that, no matter who's in office, right? So, because our money as well. So, again, it's like institutionalized a lot of stuff, have young people be at the table as decision makers and as leaders. And a lot of this deal was also addressing the concentrated poverty, lack of access to healthcare, education, housing, which is really a bigger task for everybody in this room, right? That's a huge task, but I think addressing those get to that ideal beloved community to where survival is the first thing on people's minds.
I just want to say quickly, I think it's important that we kind of get rid of this white saviorist message, right? Sometimes we feel like that as when people hear like, how can we support our, how can we help communities of color? The white saviorist message is that people think that we feel like somebody has to save us, right? Like we have to be saved. And that's incorrect, right? It's not, we need to be saved. It's more of like what this woman was just talking about, right? Is how can we empower these communities? True allyship is empowering and uplifting communities because of institutionalized racism and systemic barriers that prevent us from really doing these things, right? We have people in our communities, like I said, that have been doing the work. They have the potential. My community, I love my community. Like I said, I live in one of the worst communities in America. I grew up in one of the most treacherous communities in the world, one of the most impoverished communities in the United States. And I can tell you that the people growing in the community, not criminals and thugs. It's not just criminals and thugs. It's not just that. It's not criminals, thugs, and killers. There's doctors, there's future educators in our communities. There's future presidents in our communities that are grown up in these communities. But the things that prevent them is the systemic barriers like gun violence in our communities, these impoverished things that keep us from behind, right? Inaccessibility to so many different things that we don't even have the platform to be able to get out of these communities sometimes because we're shot and killed by the time we're 18 years old, right? Future doctors, future NBA players, there's so much talent in our communities that are taken short from us because of these barriers. So of course, eliminating systematic barriers and racism and oppression, that's the number one thing. And that has to be through the lens of everything, even in gun violence. If it's coronavirus, it doesn't matter what it is. Equity and preventing and seeing that through that lens has to be the focus for our communities, regardless of the situation. It has to be combating oppression and systematic barriers and institutionalized racism. I'm sorry, but.
And just to piggyback off of Michael and Andre, both what they said was great. And I think it's time for unity in our communities. The line between us youth, adults, leaders, I think it's time that we all put ourselves together in our own table. Like Mike said, we're always expected to be helped of, or when are we going to be getting this help and all. But I think it's time that us, the youth, and a lot of our youth leaders, a lot of our youth organizers that are effective, time for us to work together and build a network upon our communities. So now we're just even addressing to what you were talking about earlier, Michael, having a go-to somewhere, one, but two, to now have a network in our community where we can rely on ourselves. We can build up ourselves, right?
Build our own kingdom, right?
Right, build our own kingdom. We could build our own platform. You know, it's all about having and taking an initiative. So we do that. And I believe that we're going to really impact our communities at the end of the day, because that's something that we haven't seen done. And just like Andre was saying, we can look back and we've seen what hasn't worked and what's not worked. But if you want to ask me, I haven't seen us, and I haven't seen the youth have a network with youth leaders from and community organizers from Joel with Struggle Love, Jason, Jonathon, with the mayor. We can work this all out. So I think that that'd be the most effective and impactful way to impact our community right now.
Well, thank you both.
I just want to dovetail everything that everybody just said with circling back to something Kristen said in the beginning, at looking at completely doing a different way of doing government through an equity lens. But let's also look at education, Let's look at employment and economic opportunities. Let's look at, as both my young guys have said here earlier, looking at our mental health and health departments and health systems, looking at all of those things through an equity lens. And then us as community members, whether we're the elders at this point or mid-elders, we are empowering our young people like Sam, like Michael, like so many others on here to, and when I say empower, we're educating them to go into battle so they can show up to City Hall, they can show up to the Capitol, they can show up on behalf of themselves and their communities and advocate for policy that will benefit them at the and dismantle the root cause of that institutionalized, there you go, Michael, institutionalized oppression, which is called racism, that is implemented through policies that don't serve us, that policies that were built 450 years ago that were designed to keep us, and when I say us, people of color, but particularly young Black men, in a position where you have the Floyd Georges, you have all these other just tragedies that come out of a system that was not designed for us to benefit. So just again, that we as the community members, the ones who are leading this next generation, we need to make sure that they're equipped, they're empowered, they're educated to go into battle and do what they need to do at policy levels. And Eric, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, everybody, for those very powerful responses. Our next question is on a very similar topic there, and it's what more specifically can youth and young people do to empower themselves to reduce gun violence in their communities?
Okay, so I'd like to start that off. Now, a lot of us youth, well, let me piggyback real quick. As Michael was talking about, Nate had passed roughly a couple months ago at the Aurora Mall. A couple months prior to that, a friend of mine also got locked up, and another friend of mine was passed away due to another shooting that happened to the Aurora Mall. Now, a lot of youth were posting online, a lot of youth were expressing their feelings, and a lot of people were taking advantage of that, talking about like, you're using that situation for yourself. You don't know that person and whatnot and so forth. So one, I think it starts off with attacking each other, because during hard times, we seem to attack each other a lot. So I think first and foremost, to have each other's back, always be a phone call away from somebody. I know myself as youth, I was going through a lot of mental health issues. I was at a point of line where I wanted to commit suicide. And I really didn't have a lot of people to go to, you know. And I did have a mentor out in Seattle that was always able to reach out to me and talk to me and met up with me. Now, always having another person to reach out to is always handy and always appreciable.
All right, that will conclude the Q&A section. We appreciate everybody who asked all of those really wonderful and engaging questions. We're sorry that we couldn't get to all of them because there were so many. And a big thank you to all of the panelists who answered the questions. We all appreciate your expertise so much, and it has really given us a lot of insight into this issue. So next, Jonas, another youth commissioner, is going to explain how youth and adults can get involved in future prevention efforts.
Yeah, thank you, Kalina. So my name is Jonas Rosenthal, and I'm co-chair of the Mayor's Youth Commission. And thank you guys for staying so engaged and so committed through all the technical struggles and, you know, the awkward silences and the, you know, your internet shutting out or whatever. It's an election year. There are candidates running up and down the ballot, from president, as I'm sure you all know, to Congress, to state legislature, to local positions. Action on youth gun violence occurs primarily on the local level, barring that the state. Our National Congress hasn't passed sustained gun reform or anything to address youth gun violence since the 90s. The state, on the other hand, has addressed youth gun violence both in this legislative session, in the previous legislative session, and in the legislative session from 2012 to 2013, just in the last decade. The city of Denver and the surrounding counties, they've also made major strides in addressing youth gun violence. These areas are picking up the slack that our federal government isn't doing. So for my call to action, for what I'm saying for how you can stay involved in the movement and in helping to reduce youth gun violence, I want each of you to find a candidate that supports policies you believe will help us with the youth gun violence epidemic. I'm not telling you what those policies are. I don't know them. You just heard our great panelists talk about what they think they are. And I want you to support that candidate. Volunteer, donate, knock on doors, vote if you can, anything to help them. These candidates running for state or local office, they need your support. They don't have money to employ dozens of operatives. They don't have lots of staff. They rely on grassroots volunteers like you fighting for issues that you believe in and you know can make a difference. So go out, find that local candidate and fight for them, especially if you can't vote, like so many of us here. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonas, for that call to action. And the second piece of our call to action is going to come from the Apprentice of Peace Youth Organization. They are joining us today to talk about an ongoing project to reduce gun violence, and young people can also get involved in this project. And we hope that many of you, after hearing these panelists and hearing our discussions, are going to get involved in the Apprentice of Peace youth organization's projects and stay involved in gun violence prevention. So I'll turn it over to them to give a brief presentation about their project.
Peace, everybody. Thank y'all for, first of all, inviting us and having us on this call with the Denver Youth Commission. And man, y'all might want to turn y'all joint down because I'm hyped, I'm excited, I'm motivated, I'm inspired. Like the youth, man, just hearing and listening to them, Michael, Sam, Kalina, everybody, man, like I'm ready to come through this phone. I'm ready to lift up my table. I'm ready to get out here and get this work, you know what I'm saying, and do what we got to do to support them and make things happen. So I'm gonna stop right there because I can go on a serious tirade right now, just because I'm really hyped. So I'm gonna try to stick to my script because I only got a little bit of time. But thank you for the collaboration with the Denver Youth Commission and our call to action, which is the Value of Life campaign. I'm the executive director and one of the co-founders of the Apprentice of Peace Youth Organization, which I'll share a little bit about with you. Myself and my partner Ronnie, we co-founded this organization as Tai Chi instructors, and working with youth in the schools and ultimately having courageous conversations. And we started from the parks. Now we're here, you know what I mean? And we started doing multiple programs to include Tai Chi, to include fashion design, to include lyrical expression, skill trades, you name it. And at the end of the day, through all of the trials and tribulation and everything that we've learned and experiences and all those things, our mission is to reduce mental health stigma through the incorporation of leadership, arts, wellness, and skilled trades. And our vision is to create courageous conversations around the value of life. So all of our programs focus not only just the topic or subject matter, but addresses changing the stigma around mental health through courageous conversation. Because the statistics show that most of our youth are dealing with mental health issues, but not all of them are actually coming and having a conversation, or as some of the youth are saying, nowhere to even go have the conversation at. So our Youth Advisory Council, which will also speak here, allows for our youth through adult partnerships to thrive while addressing this mission, because the youth need our partnership in this to actually be successful. Because as Jonathon said earlier, they're not adults. They're youth trying to figure it out. And, it's in our partnership that we're going to be able to do that. So right now I have our VP of Community Engagement and Programs, Angela, share more with you about our AOPO YAC story.
Angela, we can't hear you. You're muted.
Darn it, you guys missed my whole spiel. I have no problem repeating. Thank you for saying that, Kristen. So as I was saying, thank you, Paz, for the introduction, and thank you for everyone being on the call and also being focused on this topic at hand. I was also saying, similar to Paz, that I too can jump through the screen with my enthusiasm and energy when it comes to the levels of oppression that was described by Micheal and by Sam and everyone else in the room when it comes to changing the narrative. So again, as Paz said, I too will do the same thing. I'll stick to our verbiage so we can get to some Q&A with you guys, but everything that was shared previously, know that I was snapping like a crazy person over here. So I'm glad to have y'all's attention and be unmuted. Am I still unmuted? Yes.
Yep,
Okay,
we
great.
can hear you.
All right. So Yak's story begins with members creating positive messages to reduce mental health stigma through the innovation of fashion and or apparel to tell their story to address changing the negative narrative associated with those who ask for help. During the fall, our Yak members, Requia and Tavy, who you'll hear from next, delivered mental health stigma workshops with our wellness conference attendees and collected feedback from both youth and adults to be featured on the apparel. Throughout the year, our Yak members led workshops and collected more feedback from community members on mental health at the Aurora Town Center Mall. Unfortunately, as it was shared previously, both in November and December of 2019, 2 violent incidents occurred with our Yak members being present that included the fatality that was described earlier. That sprung our organization, as well as our Yak members, into action to begin combating youth violence while addressing the element of mental health within the conversation through the Value of Life Call to Action movement. AOPYO Yak will officially launch the Value of Life Call to Action on June 10th of 2020 with our virtual town hall and throughout the city of Denver, starting in the fall within a variety of partner sites. Yak members will continue preparing for all activities related to the value of life throughout the summer to ensure the momentum continues alongside of spreading the word for continued support. I will now have our Yak members, Requia and Tavy, share why the Value of Life Call to Action is so important for youth and adults to be involved with, as well as how everyone can support the movement. I'll turn it over to Requia. Requia?
Thank you, Angela and Paz. The Value of Life Call to Action is important for youth and adults to be involved because it's important for everyone to be aware of the negative things happening to address making sufficient changes related to youth violence. The Value of Life allows participants, youth and adults, to define life through their eyes within a letter exercise that our YC members will deliver through our partner sites. I will now have Tavy share why the Value of Life Call to Action is so important and how you all can get involved.
Is it on mute?
Yeah, let's check.
Yep, Tavy, you're on mute.
Am I good now?
Yes.
I'm good. All right. So thank you, Angela, Paz, and Requia. The Value of Life Call to Action is important to me because I've seen and been involved in situations within my life that makes me want to advocate for the change related to youth violence. You can get involved by attending our June 10th, 2020 virtual town hall. You will receive an invite in your email inbox after attending today's town hall for our event. The AOPYO Yak virtual town hall will provide information of the evolution of our Value of Life Call to Action and also share more about our partners who are supporting our motivation to combat youth violence. Some partners include Denver Youth Commission, Pencil, Lines for Life, and more. Our goal is to launch our Value of Life Call to Action while showcasing our positive message to reduce mental health stigma that can connect mental health concerns potentially affecting how we view our lives. We look forward to have you attend our June 10th event. Continued support of the value of life. For more information, please visit aopio.org or contact community engagement at aopio.org. Thank you for listening, and we are now available for questions.
And our questions, you guys
And
can
real
either do in
quick,
the
just wanted
chat
to say
box or
also
you guys.
one more time,
sorry.
all our team. And just want to say thank you to the team, and then shout out. We have one of our youth from Oregon that's also on the line, and she was joining just to check out the town hall and hear what's going on as well. So just wanted to give her a shout out and say thank you as well. So in the Q&A, we are ready.
And all our YAC members that are present and their parents. So whoever has a question can either put it in the chat or you guys can ask us, or if you want more information, we could just keep on talking because we still have a good couple minutes. Go ahead.
Angela, how do we get on the email list to make sure we get the invite?
Lovely question, Kristen. Thank you. So Kalina and I are working very closely together. So everyone, as Tavy was just articulating, everyone that attended this town hall, we're actually going to send the link to our town hall from the emails that were provided in the attendance sheet. And if I could speak very quickly, if there's not another question, to Micheal specifically, if he's still on the call, and those that are a part of the experience at the Aurora Town Center Mall, our youth, as I said very quickly, were present at the time when 2 of those incidents occurred. And similar to what we were talking about in regards to changing the narrative that all demographically driven, high populated areas of Black and Browns are associated with violence, that is also, as I said, a part of our Value of Life Call to Action initiative. So when you guys attend the June 10th Town Hall and we have more time, as Tavy was just sharing, you'll see the evolution from the start to where we are currently, and then our both local, national, as Paz just noted as well, one of our partners among many who are outside of the state of Colorado, and then the global lens that we're going with the value of life. Because for those who are into social activism, such as myself and among our YAC, we understand the importance of conversation and momentum. And for most of us who have been a part of different just causes, it starts with a conversation, the next step is a protest, and then it's done. Because there is no follow-up, there is no follow-through, and there's no continuation of that initiative to some extent. And that is not what the value of life is going to be about. And so when you attend on June 10th, you will see that. And the collaborative collectiveness, what we were all trying to discuss today, will be a part of that language as well, and is a part of that language. Paz, do you have any other comments that you want to share?
No, I just want to say thank you again to the Denver Youth Commission, to Kalina. Great job. Thank you, everybody, for giving us a moment of your time.
And there's that awkward silence that Jonas was talking about.
Well,
Angela,
thank you.
I'm always so grateful to hear your voice. Kristen, I hear you on there. This is Toy Massey, Jekyll Foundation. There's never a better time than to see you all come together and work this magic and get these young people excited. You know that you have our support. We will do whatever you need. Pull us in. There's a couple of young people on the phone today, and they're really looking to get involved. So I want to make sure you all connect. Maybe they can raise their hand. The Denver chapter, Jack and Jill, Jaden Moore, I know was on the call earlier, but that's another resource for Sam and gang to kind of connect and really just leverage each other's energy and move into a even greater expanded demographic. And so this will be awesome. I love you guys. I got to sign off, but I'm so proud of what you're doing here. And I'm so proud that these voices are coming through and being heard.
We're excited. Thank you. See you soon.
Yeah, this is her.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
And thank you to AOPYO for that very inspiring presentation and for letting us all know how we can get involved. The last piece of our call to action is specifically for the adults and those of you who work in the city. One of the reasons that gun violence remains such a big problem in the city is because the youth voice so often goes ignored. So our call to action to you is to make sure that you incorporate the youth perspective into any decisions that you might be making around this issue and continue to involve young people in the very important work that you're doing. So thank you all for taking the time to come together to discuss such an important issue and for all of the respectful and engaged comments. This event has been recorded and will be uploaded to social media and sent out to everybody who RSVP'd. Feel free to share it with your friends, peers, and coworkers to amplify our impact. Before we conclude, I would like to thank Joel Pace, Patrice Hawkins, Patrick Hedrick, and Ben Hensley for all of your help organizing this event, and Layla Sarper and Tracy Breckenridge for your help with getting the word out. And one last thank you to all of our amazing panelists. We really appreciated your insight and expertise, and thanks you everyone for coming, and we hope to see you in June, June 10th for the AOPYO's Town Hall.
Peace.